Thank you so much, taking the time to come to Human Longevity. This company, believe it or not, has already been more than 10 years old. And the founder is Dr. Craig Venter, who actually decoded the human genome. Really, I want to share with you my lifelong passion in the longevity field and Craig's vision and why we're doing what we're doing. I have been interested in longevity as long as I'm almost 60 years old. I probably was interested in longevity technology when I was like 5, 6 years old. I grew up with my grandmother. She actually was, one day she had a pen. She went to the hospital and never came back. She was died of cervical cancer at 63, which we now know that cervical cancer is a 100% preventable disease. It's caused by a virus, HPV. And you can do vaccines now, and you can do pap smear, you can do all kinds of molecular testing. As long as you know it, it's very preventable. So I have always been fascinated about why people seemingly so healthy and they can succumb to a disease like cervical cancer and die at the age of 63, right? When I get into the college, in China at the time, I studied biochemistry. So I had to follow the professor in my university, Nanjing University. If you Google, the longest living professor in the world is actually my professor. He lived 110 years old. So he was actually educated in the US in the 1930s and went back to China, wrote the first textbook of biochemistry in China. So I was his last graduate student in 1985. But he's the one who told me, he said, Wei-Wu, since you are interested in longevity technology, you really should go to the USA. Don't stay in China because you won't learn anything. So I actually got a fellowship, came to the US in 1986. I went to Baylor, went to Mayo Clinic for a few years, did the first clinical trial, GSA, as a diagnostic marker for prostate cancer. Then I went to Mass General. So in 1993, just pure accident, fifth serendipity, Dr. Craig Venter was starting the first genome sequencing company on Earth. It's called Human Genome Sciences. And he was recruiting people from Boston. So I was literally the first scientist they recruited. Make a long story short, the first company, Human Genome Sciences, was ultimately sold to GSK for $4 billion. But I actually left HGS a lot earlier, started my own company. So I was running my first company, Origin, and went to Wharton. And 2 years later, with my partner at Wharton, my classmate, started the first venture capital fund in Maryland. In 2015, out of blue, I was investing in a company in San Diego doing traumatic brain injury market. So the CEO is saying that, your old mentor is starting a company called Human Longevity in San Diego. You should go visit it. So I said, yeah, it's I'm a sucker for longevity. So I went to see Craig. Craig said, Craig already by then, on the cover of Time magazine, he started a company called Solera, decode the first human genome. And, he's very successful. He has his own institute in La Jolla. He said, we human beings are going to a whole new era of longevity technology. It's data-driven precision medicine. So he said his last company is going to be called Human Longevity. Is how can we use these technology to help people live longer and healthier? So the last 100-some years, the biggest innovation in healthcare to extend people's average life expectancy is vaccine and antibiotics. And then obviously, new technology keeps evolving. In the US, I think the average life expectancy is 80 years old. If you look at it in the 60s, there's only 20,000 people in the whole world alive 100 years old. But this is an exponential curve. In 2020, there's already 600,000 people who are alive that are 100 years old. But this curve, I don't think you can stop it. It's in human nature. We want to live longer and live healthier. I in this field, I debated with people say, why do I want to live long? I said, well, the reality is the society is living longer. You have to deal with it. We're already taking care of about 10,000 clients. So we launched a program called 100 Plus, which are designed for people who say, I'm committed to live over 100, healthy. But we, after taking care of all these clients, we do find that there are certain things we don't know how to deal with it. For instance, last year, we discovered 3 early stage pancreatic cancer patients, like what Steve Jobs has. We don't have a full-time pancreatic cancer surgeon, so we team up with Mass General. So all three of our clients was operated by Dr. Keith Littlemore, the chief of surgery. He's like the number one pancreatic surgeon in the world. So, he was always surprised at how did you guys discover this early stage pancreatic cancer patient? So rather these the technologies out there. If the cancer is localized, you can operate on it and you will be killed. 3 o'clock, they all pronounced killed. But we decided to focus on this 100 plus program. Like any technology, if you look at the first Tesla, the Tesla Roadster is very expensive. Any technology, when you're first trying to integrate it, is always expensive. So we decided to create clinics to help to market to people who can afford it. They can actually support this movement. But in the long run, we're hoping this ultimately will go to $10 a month. Okay, that's actually our. And I'll share with you why this is humanly possible. The goal of this company is what we call scientific longevity. How do we really add 20 years of healthy life? So I think there's really 3 fundamental long-term goals of scientific longevity. One is, if you look at today, developed nation, average life expectancy, 80-something, we live our life 80 years. We probably have about a third of our life in perfect health. You're totally well. But there is a period of our health, it's called transitional state. You have hypertension, your LDL is out of whack, you're overweight, you can't go to sleep. But you're not quite sick. In the end, you get to the end stage of your life. Lee Hood is a guy, wrote the book, Age of Scientific Wellness. His wife, in his book, he talked about it because his family carries a fortune. It's an Alzheimer's gene. His wife already had Alzheimer's for 13 years. In the last 3 years, his wife doesn't even remember who he is. Okay, so this is actually the sick stage. So this is where we are, healthcare. And we Americans spend 20% of our GDP maintaining today's healthcare system. 20% of GDP, trillions of dollars, much bigger than defense budget, okay? But imagine the baby boomers, 70 million people going to 85. Do you think our GDP can support, if we stay the same old, spending $1 million in the last 3 months of late-stage colon cancer, or late-stage breast cancer, or late-stage, Alzheimer's, it will bankrupt our economy for sure. So what we say is, through science, can we live a life which is 100 years old, but majority of your life is actually well. And, you shrink the transitional stage for as short as humanly possible. And then your last few days, you drop that, I think we spend way too much money on the last 12 months of somebody's, life. I actually think because what we are trying to develop is data-driven. In the future, the care system we deliver to the world should be very inexpensive. What we are trying to promote is, the physician are all gone, right? Because the US, we spend too much money on, the individual mechanical care, right? How difficult is it for you to get 30 minutes of your specialist? But if I had your 10-year worth of data and using AI machine learning, I probably know more about your body than your 30 minutes physician spends on you. And risk is important for your health. Because like my grandmother, ultimately, by the time she felt 10, it's too late. The cause of severe cancer is a virus. It probably happened 20 years ago. It's a seed. But, eventually, the fire in the right environment will create the smokestack. And then late stage, the fire is so big, you can't save it anymore. So how do we use technology to really know the risk very early on? And genomic has a lot to do with that. But if you look at today, what tells us, let's say every one of us is programmed to live to 100, 110. But because we live in the real world, we have risks. The number one disease, this is actually the real number in 2021. But if you take COVID away, the number one killer is cardiovascular. So if you actually really want to live over 100, you better make sure your blood vessel is healthy. And the number 2 killer is cancer. Number 3 is in the US is already dementia. And then, sugar is part of the cardiovascular disease. A lot of these are impacted by metabolic diseases. One of the key technology we're working on is how do we delay all these major disease risk factors by 20 years in your life. If somebody is going to die at 80 years old with a stroke, how do we prevent that? Push that out to 200 years. And, these risks, it affects anybody. When I talk to people, yes, this is never going to bother me, okay? But, you look at people like Steve Jobs, you look at people like, Chad Boseman. I always was curious. I think if Chad Boseman had a genetic predisposition for colon cancer, because colon cancer has genetic risks. It's a disease called Lynch syndrome. I Googled it, and I then find out his brother, Kevin, is diagnosed with colon cancer as well at a very young age. So from those data, I probably can infer that there was never published paper saying Chad Boseman has genetic disease for colon cancer. But the fact that his brother also diagnosed, I think, colon cancer at around 42, 43, tells you that their family has probably Lynch syndrome. For people who have Lynch syndrome, they need to do colonoscopy at 35, not at 45. Right now, the US medical guidelines is, you get to 45 to do your first colonoscopy, okay? But with people who genetically are predisposed to colon cancer, they need to do a lot earlier. And this is really the essence of what we call individualized medicine. And one of the is slightly different. So there's a group of people actually live very long. It's actually prevalent in the United States. So there's a Time magazine. There's a whole issue talks about the science of living longer. So there's a whole chapter in this issue saying, why does the president live pretty long? They're pretty stressful people. So this paper basically talks about there's 3 pillars of presidential care. The first pillar is you really need to know yourself. What kind of virus you have, what kind of bacteria you have, what kind of genetic background you have. Do you have a blockage of heart? Do you have an early cancer growing in you? The key actually here is actually continuous monitoring. The people in the financing world, you know that you cannot assess how healthy a company is by just looking at 1 quarter of financial statement. So you need continuous assessment. This is why we create this membership. I always say, if you come here once every 10 years, there's nothing I can do for you because that's 1 data point. It's like you tell me to do consulting for a company, you give me 1 quarter of financial statement. So continuous is important. The second one is you have to have expert to help you. In the future, is AI machine learning with the help of physician. You have to have a team of people because healthcare is way too complex. I mean, the best hospital in the world, Mayo Clinic, Mass General. I always puzzle, the medicine is such a compartmentalized industry. The people look at your eye, they don't worry about your prostate or your colon or your, lung, okay? The people look at your skin, they don't care about your teeth, okay? So they don't care about anything else because it's so compartmentalized. So you need a group of physicians really look at you holistically. The third pillar is really, all diseases should be taken care of at as early stage as humanly possible. You can treat it at very early stage because of the technology innovation. And I'll share with you some of the cases. So this is really what we are developing is the HLI, Human Longevity 100 program. You can say, this is a digitalized presidential care. You come here to the clinic for half a day, we collect 150 gigabytes of data. We have your genome, we have your whole body MRI, we have your metabolome, we have, all blood. But then if you come here for 5 years, you have almost a terabytes of data. And, using AI machine learning data, plus, working with the specialists, we can probably predict what disease you will be dying of. But it matters that if you have all these data, if I tell you your biggest risk factor is dementia, and I tell you 30 years ahead of time, The question is, can you do something to alleviate that? The answer for me is absolutely. If you don't sleep well, go to the sample doctor. Make sure you sleep well. It's all right. Because sleep is so important for dementia. It's so complex. I think you almost need, the people who study 20, 30 years of this in this industry to help you. I'll share with you the cancer, prevention. I can tell you today, with the bleeding edge cancer prevention technology in this room, if you utilize all these technologies, your lifetime chance of dying from cancer is already reduced by 90%. So we have genetic reasons. Some people have genetic reasons. But then, you have the phenotype. We use whole body MRI because there's a lot of controversy. Why should, we think, by the time you are over a certain age, you should do a whole body MRI, kind of scan your whole body just to see if there's any small tumor growing in your body. And then, there's this whole new technology called liquid biopsy. So if you combine these technologies together, your lifetime chance of dying from cancer is already reduced by 90%. So genetics plays a role. The most famous, person is Angelina Jolie. Her mother died of breast cancer at 56. Her mother's sister died of breast cancer at 61. But today with genetics, you tested, she had the gene for BRCA1. And you can know about it when she's born. If she's born, she did a whole genome sequencing. Our genetic consultant will tell her, your odds of dying of breast cancer is 85% when you are around 55 to 60 years old. So, she was brave enough, obviously, to do a double mastectomy to get rid of it. I think the entire human race is still underestimate the power of our genetics. 20-some years ago, to sequence your genome cost $100 million. But look at the cost of sequencing. It's dropping down. So right now, the cheapest we can find as a research-grade genome is, I think, $200. And you only need to do once in your lifetime. That means if you live 100 years, it's $2 a year. But the most difficult part is actually not having your genome sequence. It's understanding your genome, which is a lot harder than most people think. The knowledge is 5%. We human beings today want to understand about 5% of our genome. But in the next 10 years, I think that will accelerate. I think for major diseases like breast cancer, Alzheimer's, I think our knowledge will accumulate much faster because the government and everybody invested so much to understand. And this is what we are trying to do because you need longitudinal data. So this is actually a Google-like search engine we developed, to do a deep dive on your genetics. How do we understand, your risk factor for ADHD, your breast cancer, colon cancer, dementia? So it's still quite complicated, but, we are the first company in the world that has a FDA-approved ClearCap report for whole genome sequencing to understand all your 3 billion codes. This is a friend of mine, Wei. His wife comes to, us. We did a sequencing. We did this deep dive. We find out she has a BRCA2 mutation. This happens only in Asians. Very rare. And because of this information, we sent her to, we did all kind of tests. Lo and behold, she already had a 1 centimeter breast cancer. And she was operated by the best breast cancer surgeon at Mass General Hospital. Took out the tumor. We sequenced the tumor. It's a very aggressive tumor. But she was so lucky because it was still localized 1 centimeter. But the interesting thing is both of their daughters carry the same gene the mother carries. So not only by helping the mother, now we actually have a strategy to help the daughter. You vigorous tested, your odds of dying from breast cancer is so low, because of technology with MRI, with mammogram, you really don't, I don't think her daughter will ever die of breast cancer as long as she's been taken care of, with today's knowledge, right? This is the whole body MRI. So this Center Craig's friend, in the morning he came to our clinic and said, I'm so healthy, you guys can't do anything. In the afternoon, we told him that, you have a lymphoma in your body. And then the big liquid biopsy, the grail, because today's the sequencing technology is so advanced. Tumor cell has mutations. So if you have a small tumor growing in your body, the tumor cell dies and shed the DNA into your bloodstream. So today you can use deep sequencing to discover in your body, you already have residual tumor growing in you, right? So we call it liquid biopsy. So in China, there's almost 400,000 people die of liver cancer every year. But what is the reason? HPV infection. Because China has 100 million people carries the virus, HPV. So a liver cancer over the size of 3 centimeters is very dangerous. Over 6 centimeters is a death sentence. But you can now, using liquid biopsy and image it and detect them at 0.2 centimeters, you can see it. So technically, the technology is already there, that nobody should die of liver cancer. Here's, I'll give you a few more examples, and I will take questions. So this is actually a Japanese American came to our clinic. His father died of cardiovascular disease. His grandfather died of cardiovascular disease. He said, my family is doomed. It's like but if you do the whole genome sequencing, he has a gene called PCSK9. So it's genetic. Genetically, he has very bad LDL cholesterol. But luckily, there's a drug made by Novartis. It's an siRNA drug. You only need to do once every 6 months injection. His LDL is more than normal. So in the future, people like that, his father, his grandfather died around 50. That's called a genetic fate. But with today's technology, I think this time, as long as he stays with us, I think, he should never die of cardiovascular disease. This is really what we talk about, precision medicine, individualized medicine. Last example I will give you is Alzheimer's. So there's now genetic tests. Alzheimer's clearly has a genetic element to it. So we have a score called polygenic risk score. You can pick 20 genes. This is all very well published. When you're born, you already know, you have higher genetic risk factor for Alzheimer's. This is a client, he's a professor in UCSD. If you look at his hippocampal occupancy on the MRI, this person has a genetic predisposition for Alzheimer's. He has a gene called ApoE4. But if you look at his hippocampus, which is a part of the brain that controls your short-term memory, it drops much faster than the average human being. So 7 years ago, we already predicted this professor will get Alzheimer's. He never believed us. But last year, 2023, he's officially diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Retrospectively, we probably could have done something different. But the Alzheimer's research is still at its very infancy. But there's plenty of papers. There's a Lancet paper that tells you there's all kinds of things you can do to, delay Alzheimer's. This is actually the algorithm we developed to predict an individual's lifelong risk of developing Alzheimer's. I think this is cheaper than $10. Right now we have 3 clinics. One is the oldest is in San Diego. So this one is about 2 years old. We built one in Beijing because I think my dream is always to democratize this to billions of people. In the future, it's all going to be AI data driven. I'm not going to get too much into the nitty gritty. We publish a lot. Nature ranked us as the top 50 published companies, biomedical company. The punchline of this paper is when people think they're healthy, if you use the bleeding edge technology to assess them, they're not so healthy. About 2% of them, we already can find cancer in people that they think they're healthy. Their brain has like a grape-sized aneurysm. It can burst anytime. And 7% people has, already have signs of coronary artery blockage, which is, with the risk back or heart attack. About 40% of people, we think about 14% of people already have pretty serious health risk factors. And the 40% of them has chronic risk factors. So right now, our clinic is, tailored to the high-end client base, corporate client. Let's, help the people who can afford it. We tell the people who can afford it, say, you are supporting the future of longevity medicine for humanity. So the presidential care will be delivered, using data, right? This is really the goal of scientific longevity. Majority of the human beings should, like Charlie Munger, like Henry Kissinger, can live to 100, productive, then drop dead. So we think that medicine has historically has been clinical science supported by data. Wisdom medicine in the future is about to become a data science supported by clinicians. And with this new model, we're all going to live over 100 and healthy, productive. So my dream is before I die, human longevity clinic will have 50,000 of them in your neighborhood, but it's all digital. And a nurse can actually solve 90% of the problem because you have all the data behind it, by using precision medicine to deliver a longevity care. And I'm hoping that today I can mention with all these technology, there's more and more people in this room will actually live over 100 and be productive. Thank you so much.